Now I'm ready to go. Hey, thanks folks for joining me. I'm in my hideaway under the Senate floor because we're in the middle of a couple of votes. But I want to just really talk about two things. And first is just my deep distress over the shooting at the Huguenot High School graduation at the Altria Center the other day. I was really stunned when I heard this news. Two of my three children graduated from high school, walked across that stage. And as a mayor and governor and senator, I've often been asked to give high school graduation speeches from that stage, probably numbers of times, including at one of my own kids' graduation in 2008. My wife, Ann, has also given high school graduation speeches there. That's a space that, for Richmonders, we know it so well. We know it so well from graduations, from concerts, from traveling theatrical productions. And it's what I think of as kind of a safe space. But when I heard this news the other day, I just could visualize the panic that it created. You begin with a day that is one of the happiest days in people's lives. As you look back over your life, I'm 65 now, graduating from high school, graduating from college, my wedding day, the birth of my three kids. Okay, those are like the 5 best days of my life. And I think most people think that about their high school graduation. It's an achievement. You work hard to get there. You have a lot of support from family and friends. And that moment is about you and about celebrating the achievement with excitement about what's to come in your life. And the notion that in the middle of that moment, that pivotal moment in anybody's life where they're celebrating achievement and thanking people who helped them get to that point, that violence would break out, that a young graduate, Sean Jackson, his stepfather, Renzo Smith, would be killed, that others would be trampled and injured, but that everybody there, teacher, faculty, staff, school board members, students, the graduating class, everybody who's there for them would be traumatized. They're not going to forget this. They're going to remember this moment of pandemonium and chaos and panic and violence for the rest of their lives. And I just feel shocked, and I feel helpless, and I feel like the adults of the world are letting the kids of the world down. I mean, we just finished a hearing. I came from a hearing of the Health Educational Labor Pension Committee about youth mental health challenges. And I was reflecting during the hearing the challenges of being exposed to trauma. I visited earlier this year with parents and faculty at Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News, and where the teacher, Abby Zimmer, was shot in early January of this year. And thank God no one died. But everybody's traumatized, and everybody's thinking about it every day they drop their kids off to school. What's going to happen today? There used to be places in our society that were safe spaces. Schools were safe. Entertainment venues like the Altria were safe. Churches were safe. There's no safe space left. There's no place left in America where people feel completely comfortable or don't have some worry about what might happen to them if somebody with a gun and with problems decides to end lives by violence. And it can seem a little bit helpless. It can seem a little bit helpless. And yet when I feel helpless, I remind myself that we have taken steps in Virginia to not eliminate gun violence, but to make our Commonwealth safer. We are a state that, incidences like the other day notwithstanding, we have patiently and slowly worked in Virginia to make the state safer. And over time, we've worked our way into the ranks of the 10 safest states in the country. That wasn't the case when I got into public life 30 years ago. We were not in the safest states in the country, but we've worked to do it. In the past in Richmond, we've successfully worked at times of high violent crime to bring it down. We passed a bipartisan gun safety bill in Congress last year for the first time in more than 20 years. All of these things are not solving the problem, but they're demonstrating to us that we can find solutions if we stay with it. So I just want to offer to the Jackson Smith family and to all of the Huguenot family and to all of the RPS family my feelings of solidarity with you and sorrow for you, and dedication to working together with you and continuing to work until we get this right. Second topic I want to talk about, and it's sort of related, is I challenged my staff when the 118th Congress began that, we do a lot of good legislation, and I feel pretty good about my legislative track record, but I don't want to just be known for this bill and that bill, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Can we find a theme under which we could put many of our initiatives? And I suggested then the theme would be recovery. We talk about people being in recovery. There are tens of millions of Americans who are in recovery might be recovery from long COVID, might be recovery from substance use or alcohol use disorders or other challenges. But if a person can be in a recovery, so can a community and so can a nation. And after 3 years of COVID, deaths of more than 1 million people, all kinds of illnesses, all kinds of economic dislocations, jobs lost, businesses closed. I think we are now a nation in recovery. The public health emergency ended on May 11. That doesn't mean COVID is gone, but it means we're moving into a new phase. We're seeing record job growth, more job growth in 28 months of the Biden administration than in any 4-year period under any previous president. We've got a lot to do and a long way to go, but we've come through a very tough patch, and Americans are tough people, and tough times don't last, but tough people do, and we're tough people. And so both, I'm trying to unify my various legislative provisions, and there are basically 4 pillars: jobs in the economy, healthcare, education, and public safety. I'm trying to unify my legislative initiatives all under the goal of American recovery, this roadmap to recovery agenda. And nobody should bet against the American people. After a tough time, there's a lot of suffering, and it's not easy, and our divisive politics makes it even harder, but nobody should count us out. And I am very, very devoted toward getting these key pieces of my legislation done under this notion that America is a nation that is climbing a ladder. After a very difficult time, we're climbing a ladder, we're moving on up, we're on a path to recovery, and I'm glad to be arm in arm with Virginians as we're undertaking that. And with that, I'm glad to open it up. And I know Eve will monitor or traffic cop the questions.
Yep. Okay, first we'll go to Jamie from Gray TV.
Hi there,
Jamie.
Senator Kaine. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
I like to keep you on your toes by asking you about something you didn't address at all.
Good.
Appalachian protesters are rallying outside the White House today against the Mountain Valley Pipeline. They want the president to promise that he won't approve any new fossil fuel projects. Do you think the president can possibly comply with that demand? And are the president and Democrats losing their argument that you're serious about the climate at this point?
Well, Jamie, I don't think we're losing the argument, because if you look, for example, at what the Inflation Reduction Act clean energy tax credits are doing, they're leading to a revolution in clean energy innovation, manufacturing, and production in the United States and in Virginia. We've gone from one of the bottom of the barrel in terms of solar deployment in the country to now top 10 within just a couple of years. We're going to be the center of offshore wind in the United States, and we're going to be the first community in the United States that's really involved in the manufacture of offshore wind components. So we're not losing ground. The Mountain Valley Pipeline, I was very, very disappointed in it for a very particular reason. I don't think Congress should weigh in pro or con against pipelines. I think in the 1930s, we handed these decisions to administrative agencies because Congress is poorly suited to doing these projects. You want it to be decided by a body with expertise, and you also want it somewhat insulated bluntly from politics and campaign contributions. It's the wrong thing to do. And after having told people in Virginia for years, I'll help you fix the permitting process to make it better, but I'm not putting my thumb on the scale on this deal. The fact that we would basically say we need to do permitting reform, but then we take one project in the United States and we exempt it from all the permitting and judicial reform proposals and just give it a green light. And giving it a green light means you take people's land. A private company gets to take people's land. People who don't want to have their land taken, people who aren't going to see any benefit from this pipeline, people for whom their land might be the only thing they have. And so I was very, very disappointed that in an unprecedented way, Congress decided to just terminate the permitting process and give a special sweetheart deal to this one project over every other project. However, something like a debt ceiling deal between a Democratic Senate and a Republican House, there's going to be compromise, including compromises that I wish weren't made, that I wouldn't make if I was the one with the pen in my hand. But you can't do this and find a path forward on something like debt ceiling and budget in a divided Congress without compromise. So I undertook my best effort to get the Mountain Valley Pipeline provision stripped out. They didn't want to even give me a vote on it. And I said, if you don't give me a vote, I'm going to stonewall you until you do. And I got a vote. I could only persuade 30 of my 100 colleagues. And I'm not a take my ball and go home person. I'm not a my way or the highway person. I got my vote, but when I couldn't convince my colleagues to get on board, of course, I supported the ultimate deal to avoid a default. I don't exactly know, what the president can commit to, because there is a permitting process, and I'm not sure the president, even a president, should be able to just override it. I think we should have permitting standards that are tough, that are fair, that don't allow decisions to just be stretched out forever. But again, if you're going to take people's land, then there ought to be a really elevated demonstration that a project is necessary, that the route that's chosen is the optimal route, and that the operator who's proposing to do it can be trusted to do it in a high quality way. I don't feel like any of those really apply to the Mountain Valley Pipeline, at least as its history would demonstrate.
Okay, next we'll go to Mike from WVEC.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, Senator. You kindly gave me a statement earlier this week, so you won't be surprised I'm going to ask you on camera now. The Navy INSERV report about the poor material condition of the fleet and that it's been declining since 2017. As Sea Power Subcommittee Chairman, I know you're distressed by that. Just tell me your reaction. How alarming should it be to we taxpayers?
Well, Mike, it's very alarming. I mean, yeah, I'm newly taken the gavel of the Sea Power Subcommittee. And this is among a very small number of priorities that I put at the top of the list, because I want to protect taxpayers' investments, because shipbuilding and ship repair is really important in Virginia. But also, let's look at the big picture. At the end of the day, shipbuilding and ship repair is about keeping the nation safe, and we are investing more and more of our attention and focus and resources into being strong in the Indo-Pacific, and that is a naval region. This isn't the future of the challenges in the world will rely heavier and heavier and heavier on Navy and Marine assets. And so looking at the degraded quality of some of our ship and sub platforms at a time when we need them more and more, the trend lines are going in opposite directions, and that's not positive. So we are right now writing the defense bill. We will likely be voting on the defense bill in committee 2 weeks from today. And you're going to see heavy investments in the defense bill in shipbuilding, ship repair, in readiness, making sure that our shipyards are moving ahead, that we're making the investments we need to in the shipyard industrial optimization plan that are ultimately the investments that are needed to cure this bad grade card. We got to get a better grade card next time, and we're not going to do it by waving a magic wand. We're going to be doing it by making more investments in our industrial base and shipyards. And I think you're going to see a defense bill that will do that.
All right, next we'll go to Danielle from WVNS.
Hey, Danielle.
Hi, Senator. How are you doing today?
Good.
I just wanted to know what correlations you've seen with gun violence during the pandemic, and how has it improved?
So, that's a really good question, Danielle. I should know statistics on this. I should know it. I don't. What I know is anecdotal evidence, and that is the pandemic put so much stress on people's lives. And when you put people who are already under stress under more stress, bad things happen. So you take the everyday normal stresses that existed on March 12th, 2020, and then you add to it, you shut down schools, you shut down the economy, 1 million people die, people lose relatives that are close to them. People get sick, people deal with long COVID, people have learning loss in schools. People who are in recovery, for example, they couldn't do group therapy because it was, we weren't doing that, and a Zoom session isn't as good as doing something in person. So the last 3 years have been a time of intense isolation and increased health and economic stress on people. And when that happens, and a lot of the stresses have been acute among young people, and in some ways I kind of feel like young people and senior citizens, in terms of if you look at age groups, kind of were the demographic that bore the most severe brunt of the last 3 years of dealing with COVID. When you see that, then you see bad things happen. And the bad things may be, and they are, we see increases in the percentage of young people contemplating suicide, increased mental health needs, increased number of young people who feel hopeless or isolated or alone. And when you see that, you tend to see violence by young people, violence against young people increase. Then there is more than a correlation. Then there's a causal increase about, okay, then when there is violence, then what's the effect on young people? You know, if you go to Covenant School in Nashville, Christian school in Nashville, and you see kids shot right in front of you in the hallway, you're going to be affected by that for the rest of your life. If you're one of your 5 happiest days in your life, your high school graduation is perverted into a chaotic pandemonium of violence, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life. And some are resilient enough to deal with that, but nobody can just slough that off. It's going to have an effect on you. So I think the last 3 years have by taking people already under stress and putting them under more stress is creating a huge number of challenges. So there's numerous solutions. There's got to be more mental health access. There's got to be better and better laws about guns. How does a 18-year-old, how does a young person who's not able to get a gun, not legally able to get a gun used in a crime like this? There's going to be an answer to that. We need to know the answer to that. And I think that will be educational and may point the way towards some additional reforms that are necessary.
All right, next we'll go to Mitchell from WTOP.
Hey, Mitchell.
Hi, Senator. Thanks a lot for joining us.
You bet.
Wanted to go back to an issue that we've talked about before, but some dynamics have changed a bit related to defense funding in Ukraine.
Yes.
As you're no doubt aware, the House Speaker McCarthy is clearly dealing with some issues on his conservative flank. And also earlier this week, he said that he would not go for a supplemental on defense, which, as I know, has angered some of your Republican colleagues. Are you concerned a little bit now, even though there's a lot of support for Ukraine aid in Congress, that things could get a little dicey down the road?
Mitchell, we would be foolish to be complacent and just assume because we've had bicameral and bipartisan support yesterday that we're going to have it tomorrow. We can't be complacent about it. But I'll tell you what, I've been on the Armed Services Committee for 10 years. I interact not just with my Senate colleagues on the committee, but with my colleagues in the House Committee. We're going to do an NDAA that will largely be guided by what we just agreed to in the bill to avoid a debt ceiling default. That was a good bill that will produce stability, whether we like it at all or not. At least it's going to produce some stability in our budget deliberations for the next couple of years. But it was the case that did not foreclose the possibility of supplemental funding. I think what we need to do is do the base bill at the number that was agreed to by everybody. We're going to watch and see, and we have allocated a lot of money to Ukraine. Not all of it has been spent yet. So we still have dollars that we can spend to make sure Ukraine has the resources to defend itself. And then we're going to be obviously watching the success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive against this brutal and illegal Russian invasion. And it gets worse and worse every day. And it's clearly the Russians blowing up a dam in Ukraine to flood innocent people. It's just an example of the kind of butchery and illegality that Vladimir Putin is resorting to, and that raises the stakes. We've got to be successful. So I think if we do a budget kind of according to the numbers we agreed, we continue to provide that support that's already programmed for Ukraine. We watch the success of the counteroffensive. I continue to believe that if we, a few months down the road before year end, decide Ukraine needs more support, I still think the support's going to be there, bicameral, bipartisan, not unanimous. There will be some on the Democratic side and maybe a few more on the Republican side that may balk. But I think the consensus is still very, very strong that the U.S. needs to be there for this ally, linking arms with our other allies, obviously, and that we will be there.
All right, next we'll go to Tyler from WRIC.
Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Senator, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
There are a couple of candidates for delegate in the Virginia House who are campaigning on supporting term limits for Congress through a constitutional convention. I know that's an uphill battle, but are term limits something that you think would be a good or a bad idea in Congress?
You know, I generally, I've lived under term limits and not. So I lived under the tightest term limit there was, one-term governorship. Only Virginia has it. And there were benefits and disadvantages to it. I generally am of the belief that term limits in Congress are not a good idea, and that the citizens should make the decision, because there are state legislatures that have term limits, California and others, that are pretty tight. And my observation of those legislatures is, what do the term limits get you? They limit the time that an office holder can be in place. And then it kind of empowers lobbyists and the crowd that surrounds the Capitol building, because they don't have to go. And I think it's pretty good for members to have some expertise, to build up staffs with expertise. And then you listen to all the lobbyists and people who do government relations, but you don't let them write your bills and you don't let them call the tune. And I worry that jurisdictions that have tight term limits in legislative bodies end up just disempowering the elected officials and advantaging the government relations folks, which I'm not sure that's what people want when they think about term limits. I'm not sure that's what they really want, but that's been a practical effect. So it's not the issue that I feel the most strongly about. If there were to be, a momentum toward term limits, and I would willingly live under whatever rules there are, just like I was fine to live under a one-term governorship. I don't really think term limits, though, is likely to create better quality government and service of constituents. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
All right, next we'll go to Brendan from WTKR.
Hey, Brendan.
Hello, Senator. Question for you again about the shooting in Richmond. The Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, gave some pretty emotional remarks at the scene about, the shooting maybe being an indication that people aren't being held accountable for their actions, and that there need to be tougher penalties for people. In your view, does this show that that is the case?
Well, look, I don't know that I'd ever rush to a crime scene within a few hours after it happened and try to make a headline telling people what to do and blaming folks. I mean, I remember in the aftermath of the shooting at Virginia Tech, I went there and reporters tried to engage me in policy discussions, and I said, hey, look, there's going to be time for that later. I'm here to comfort families. And I was a little bit struck that it seemed odd to me that those press statements were, they just seemed out of place. There's a time to talk about solutions, but in the minutes after a tragedy to do that, it just seemed like an attempt to grasp a headline. And for what purpose? I mean, that's almost pouring salt in people's wounds at a time when they're very, very tender and very, very pained. So I didn't get it. I did think that this notion of, kind of blamed everybody. It's everybody's fault, but boy, don't worry, there's nothing that we need to do about guns. Are you kidding me? I mean, mass shootings are a regular fact of life here, and they're not a regular fact of life in so many nations that we kind of view as allies and similar to us. And so what's the difference between us and those other nations that we think of as similar? Is it that we're worse people? No. Is it that we have a uniquely American penchant for harming each other in a way that other nations, peoples don't have? I don't think that's it either. I think we are an outlier. We are an outlier in the ease with which an underage youngster whose brain isn't fully formed, who has bad impulse control, like a lot of kids do, we're an outlier in the ease with which a young person can get a gun and use it to settle an argument. It's, mostly when we talk about American exceptionalism, we're talking about things that we're exceptionally good at, but here's something we're exceptionally bad at. And just trying to blame others and deflect attention away. We just need to know the full story of this situation. And I bet if we know the full story of it, including how the youngster was able to get a weapon. It will point the way to things that we can do. And again, we don't have to be pessimistic. Virginia was not one of the 10 safest states in the country when I started into political life in 1994. During the time I was governor, we finally moved into that 10 safest states. Recently, the numbers came out again, and it showed Virginia in the 10 safest states when you look at major and violent crime. So we've shown that we can improve our situation. Let's just keep trying to improve it rather than using tragedies as an opportunity to play a blame game.
All right, next we'll go to Michael from the Richmond Times-Dispatch.
Hey, Michael.
Hello, Senator. How are you?
Good.
Good. I'm following up on that same issue.
Yeah.
I understood from your office yesterday that you intend to roll out some initiatives legislatively in Congress to address the issue of gun violence. Representative McClellan,
Yes.
Congresswoman McClellan also had a number of initiatives at the state level, which are still in the pending budget. I'm interested in what your approach is going to be to addressing the issue of gun violence legislatively.
Yeah, Michael, I will make sure my staff gets you the press statement about this roadmap to recovery agenda, because one of the 4 pillars is public safety, and it includes efforts that we are working on. Senator Warner and I have a bill called the Virginia Plan, for example. Why don't we introduce federally what Virginia did in the 2019-2020 timeframe that has made our state safer? If we could do it in Virginia, we ought to be able to do it nationally. So, and right now, I'll be candid, I don't have 60 votes for this in the Senate, but I didn't have 60 votes to repeal the Iraq war authorizations for years, and then suddenly I did. And you know, there are many initiatives I've been part of where I didn't start with 60 votes. I hardly started with, you know, more than 1 vote, but I've been able to, over time, convince colleagues. So there are gun-related bills that I think we should do at the federal level, just picking up on what Virginia has done. But it's not just guns. Those who say mental health is an issue, they're right. You know, I often argue with them because they'll say mental health is the only issue, and then they want to avoid the gun discussion, but they're not wrong about mental health. And particularly mental health among young people. Virginia gets very, very poor marks, sadly. And we should all be sad about this. We get very poor marks in terms of access to mental health, and particularly access to mental health for young people. And so equipping our young people with decision-making skills so that they don't have to settle an argument or disagreement by violence, but that they can find more productive ways to resolve. That's really important. And then also making sure that there's mental health resources to help young people who are traumatized by events like those that occur, like that, which occurred in Richmond 2 days ago, really important.
Okay, next we'll go to Greg from the Washington Post.
Hey, Greg.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking questions. I want to get you to talk about the competition for the FBI headquarters with Maryland.
Yep.
We've seen this document now that the FBI put together outlining why it's more convenient for them to be closer to Quantico. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, or anything you can share about where that stands.
Greg, that document is a very important document. Now, you would read it and you would say, but it's important. And it was sort of prepared. The FBI was getting asked by Marylanders, well, why is proximity to Quantico so important? And so, you know, it was prepared by the FBI knowing that it was going to go into the hands of folks in Maryland that didn't necessarily agree with it, which makes me very impressed that they were just as blunt and candid about it. But at the end of the day, the document isn't that unusual. Of course, having an FBI headquarters proximate to their primary training facility would provide some real synergies, and that would have a huge value. The Marylanders have tried to rewrite the administration's criteria for selecting the site. There are a set of criteria. The criteria that's given the most weight is mission compatibility, and in the mission compatibility, access to other FBI and related missions is given huge priority, which it should be. And so Senator Warner and I, you know, we together, both the Maryland and Virginia delegations made our pitch to the GAO and the FBI in early March. We were told we might know something by the end of that month. It's now 3 months later and we still don't. but this is just additional evidence, not evidence that the Virginia delegation put together. This is additional evidence by the agency whose mission is the mission that ought to matter to us, that just says that the synergy of the Virginia site makes it the preferable site. And Senator Warner and I have been just in constant touch with the White House saying, don't change the criteria. Any change of the criteria would look like it was a political move. You wrote the criteria, you wrote them correctly. It's about the mission of the agency and their effectiveness first. That should be the first priority. And I hope this is just one more bit of evidence that demonstrates there is a clear preference, and that preference is the Virginia site.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, for our last question, we'll go to Nick from WVTF.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, Senator Kaine. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Thanks.
I was just wondering if you could respond quickly to the Air Pollution Control Board voting to remove the state from RGGI.
I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake. I think the RGGI has already produced some significant value for Virginia, and it's kind of like another decision that the administration recently made. And maybe I haven't kept up with this, and the Youngkin administration has changed this, but there's a consortium of East Coast states that the Biden administration has pulled together regarding offshore wind. And Virginia, to the last I checked, was the only state on the East Coast that's doing offshore wind that decided they didn't want to participate in that. I am really proud of Virginia. When Virginia participates in stuff, it goes better for us and it goes better for everybody. And when we don't participate, it goes worse for us and worse for everybody. So I frankly think when we are engaged in something like RGGI, because we have such a tradition of innovation and excellence, we will make it better for Virginia and for everybody else. When we're engaged with other nations doing offshore, other states doing offshore wind, we'll make it better for Virginia and for everybody else. So I think that was a mistake for the Air Board to pull out.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks everyone
Thanks,
so much
everyone.
for joining. We'll follow up shortly with the video link.